Practical Bioethics, and this is the Clinical Ethics Corner. Clinical ethics is an ever-changing field. As healthcare changes, new ethical questions arise, and thus, clinical ethics consultation teams are asked to weigh in. A challenging subject that has seen numerous involvement of ethics recently are challenging discharge situations. While many are not asking deep philosophical ethical questions, there is still plenty of support that the clinical ethics team can provide. Take, for example, Mr. Baylus. He was a man in his mid-80s and had suffered from advanced dementia for several years. He had lost his capacity to make medical decisions a few years back and has been completely dependent on caregivers, especially his wife. Besides his dementia, there was nothing medically wrong with him and was expected to live for the foreseeable future. One evening, Mr. Baylus was having a difficult time with his dementia, and his wife dropped him off at the hospital emergency department and then left and did not return. The hospital admitted him, calmed him, checked him, and determined that he had no medical reason to stay in the hospital. But that was just the beginning of the story. Mr. Bayless's wife had left their house, moved in with her child from another marriage, and did not provide any contact information. For all intents and purposes, Mr. Bayless was stuck at the hospital. The team could not discharge him to home because no one lived there, and that would be patient abandonment. We could not discharge him to a step-down facility or a long-term care facility because his wife would need to be involved and sign him in. We could not discharge him to where his wife was living because that was not her house and that was not his son. So in the eyes of others, this would be like discharging him to a random person. He was stuck at the hospital unless the team could figure out the right place for him. While this was happening, Mr. Bayless was causing disruptions in the hospital. Because of his relative lack of medical needs, Mr. Bayless would have a lot of time on his hands. Due to his severe dementia, he would not stay in his room and would wander around the hospital, often trying to find his way into other patients' rooms. This was very troubling to other patients. He did not have behavior issues, but he could be difficult to work with. This was one of the reasons his wife abandoned him. When the hospital got in contact with her, she said that he was too difficult to care for anymore and that she could not do it anymore. She seemingly cared about him, but was at her limit of ability, both mental and physical, to provide for him and did not see an end in sight. She simply wanted him to become, quote, somebody else's problem. This case brings several important questions to light. What is the responsibility of the hospital to these kinds of patients? Patients that have clear needs but not directly addressed by the hospital. Whose responsibility is Mr. Bayless? Himself, his wife, the hospital, or is he society's problem? What solution or location would be in Mr. Bayless's best interest? And what needs to be established to help these patients going forward? This will become a growing problem and will only become more common. If you were the ethicist in this case, what would you do? What would you feel are the appropriate first steps? And what needs to be established for the future? This is, again, a challenging situation that no one can have immediate certainty as to what the right decision is and could certainly benefit from the involvement of the clinical ethics consultation team.